Morning, Kat.
Morning, Sarah.
We're here again.
Yes, we are.
So last time we had one of these chats, we were talking about Rishi and his summer statement, and we talked about eat out to help out and all that good stuff. And at the time, you told us we were going to have a budget.
You did, yes.
But second wave, things not looking so good on the old COVID front with numbers. So rather than try and collect back what he needs to in tax, he's decided to do a winter economy plan.
Yes, that's what he's called it.
And so this is a bit of a change of focus, though. He's trying to move now to looking at his what he calls viable jobs.
Yes.
And we'll talk about the job support scheme and the extension of self-employed, but let's talk about first the sort of the little things he covered off.
Mm-hmm.
So what's he doing with VAT?
Okay, so he announced some tax cuts and deferrals. The VAT reduction of 15% is going to stay now until next year, March 21, and that's for the hospitality and tourism sector.
So that's to help those people in those.
So that's the industry that's been most affected by COVID, unfortunately. So we'll give them a bit of a breather with their upcoming tax bills. Also, any deferred payments that you deferred from March 20 to the end of the tax year, you can choose to pay that over equal monthly instalments instead.
So this was the VAT that people didn't pay between March and
it was
July.
Between March and June.
March and June
2020.
They had that VAT payment then where it was just automatically deferred because
Absolutely.
we were right in the middle of COVID.
Yes.
They've been writing out and asking people to pay the TIF if they can, but now they're saying if you can't, and it's easier to break it down over 12 months. So that goes all the way through to the end of the 21 tax year.
It does, yes, absolutely.
Wow.
And they're also doing that with no interest.
Fabulous.
Which is quite generous.
So then if I didn't pay my self-assessment second payment in July, what's he offered? What's he offering for those people?
So obviously if you didn't pay your July bill, and also if you've got an upcoming January 21 tax bill, you can actually spread that in monthly payments now from next year. It's got to be, your tax bill's got to be between £32 and £30,000.
Wow. Big range. So if I owe £31, I can't spread that.
No,
if I owe 32, I can spread that over 12 months.
Absolutely.
Wow. But he's going to charge interest for self-employed.
He is, unfortunately. Now, we've had no interest charge from July to January, but he will charge interest from the 1st of February.
And what are the things people have got to have done to be able to access that scheme?
So to access the scheme, you've got to have no outstanding tax returns, you've got to have no other debts, no other payment plans with HMRC, and your tax bill can't be more than 60 days old. So any historical tax bills we can't include in this payment plan.
And this is sort of, they go online and something
yes,
online.
It's called the time to pay service plan, and you can go in online and set it up yourself once you've submitted your tax return.
So I suppose the big thing for us, for our clients, is to say to people, if you want to access that, please get us your tax return.
Absolutely. We can work out your numbers.
We can work out your numbers. We can check what your July payment should have been. We can work out what your payments on account is. We can also look at reducing next year's payments on account, given that it will be such a funny year.
Absolutely.
And then you can perhaps spread those, but bearing in mind people have got to pay interest. So I think it's important to get your tax return in and know what you've got to pay.
What number we're looking at, absolutely.
Yeah, and how long you need to pay it.
Yes, and also anybody that's got a tax bill exceeding £30,000, obviously don't worry, because we can still apply to HMRC for a payment plan. So we suggest you get in touch with us and let us work out some affordability for you.
And it's fair to say, because of everything that's going on, HMRC
they'll be more
generous.
I'd say generous, yes.
But only if you're making the contact.
Absolutely.
You've got to have that conversation with them.
Yeah.
You've got to be in touch with them, haven't you?
You need to go to them, absolutely.
And then he's done something similar, I guess, for the loans, the bounce back and the coronavirus business interruption loans.
Yes, he's extended the repayment term now from 6 years to 10 years.
Wow.
Which is obviously going to halve some people's repayments that are going to start next year. Struggling businesses can apply for interest-only payments for a certain period of time, and also pause repayments.
So a bit of a holiday.
A bit of a holiday, yes. He's going to extend the deadline as well. Also, he has extended the deadline now to the end of November
to apply.
From the beginning.
So that's the deadline to apply for a new loan. So again, it's important that people look at the cash flow and work out what they can do. And
people may not have considered one previously, but it might be worth having that cash reserve now ready for the winter.
Yeah, have a look at your cash flow and decide if certainly a bounce back loan, because they are so easy to apply for, aren't they? Right. So they were the sort of little round the edge bits he talked about.
He also talked about the self-employment scheme, didn't he?
Oh right, yes. So he's extended that.
Yes, he's so the grant extension now for the self-employment income support scheme. This will apply to people who were previously eligible under the SEISS scheme.
So this isn't for new people who perhaps just
not.
become self-employed to work, because we know there are people that sort of fell through the gap of that.
They did do and weren't entitled to anything, and he hasn't covered that off as of yet. We're still waiting for an announcement for what he's going to do for those. This is for people who were eligible previously, and even if you didn't make a claim for the self-employment grant, you can make a claim now under the grant extension. He's going to provide 2 further payments covering a 6-month period. The first one will cover from November to January, and that will be 20% of your average monthly profits, capped at £1,875.
Wow. And he hasn't said what the second one's going to be yet.
The second grant will cover February to April, but he hasn't confirmed the amount yet. So I imagine he's going to see what the take-up is on the first grant and what the affordability for the government is of paying out under a second grant.
And it is important that people have to make these declarations that you have got to be showing that you are affected by COVID.
Absolutely, you've got to be actively trading, continuing to trade, but your business has got to be adversely affected by COVID. So it'll be things like decreased turnover,
spending more on cleaning and things
PPE
like that,
equipment,
PPE,
reduced client base in services like you mentioned,
hairdressers
when we were talking.
So hairdressers obviously have got to have these bigger gaps between the clients. They've got to do a big wipe down, so they're spending more on the cleaning and they're getting less clients through.
Absolutely.
But they have got to be able to demonstrate that, so they've got to keep good records to show increased spend or decreased turnover or a bit of both. And those grants, like the first 2, people have to apply for them themselves.
Have to apply for themselves, and they are taxable.
Taxable, that was the bit I was going to come to.
That's the key, they are still taxable.
So people need to keep a note of them and tell us about them next year when we do the tax returns, because that's when we're going to be reporting them. Yes. So those are the little bits around the sides. His main thing he spoke about was his replacement for what we've been calling furlough, which is this new job support scheme.
It is, yes.
So a bit different from furlough in that he's now very much concentrating on what he called viable jobs. So he's not wanting people to sit at home that's never going to have a job to go back to.
No, he doesn't want to support those kind of jobs. No, people who've got viable jobs, absolutely.
So what does that entail? What can employers claim?
So what the job support scheme entails is that your employee will have to be working 33% of their usual hours. That will be the minimum working hours requirement. The government will pay a grant of 22% to top up their wages, but you will be required to pay 22% as well towards that. So your employee is only going to receive 77% in total, and you can't top them up to 100% of wages.
No, because this is designed again to sort of, it's because you can't afford to pay them. If you could afford to pay them, you'd have them at work even if they weren't doing as much. This is you can't afford to pay them,
so at least you can have them in doing something, and the government will top up so they are receiving a certain amount of their.
So the example they give in their fact sheet, and I think it's quite a good example, is actually somebody who works 5 days a week. So the numbers are slightly different than the minimum. So let's go through this example. So somebody works 5 days a week. They're going to work two of their normal days.
Yes.
The 3 days they're not working, effectively, the government are going to pay for a day, the employer is going to pay for a day, and the person's not going to get paid for the last day. So if we use that, by working 2 days, they're working 40% of their normal hours. The government's paying 20, the employer's paying another 20 to add to their original 40, so they're paying 60, and the individual's
getting 80%.
Getting 80%.
Nothing for the 20% they're not working.
And when we say the government are paying for that third day, they're not paying for pensions or national insurance.
No, unfortunately not. The grant's not as generous as furlough, so that will cost you as an employer.
But the good thing is if somebody wasn't on furlough, but perhaps you've got a bit of a downturn now, this is a new scheme and you can access it for people who you didn't use furlough.
Absolutely.
And what about how long have people had to work for us before we can access this?
So the key thing is they've got to be on the RTI submission by the 23rd of September. So they've got to be employed by you by the 23rd of September to access this new scheme. Obviously, to work out usual hours and what figures it will be based on, we need to wait for the detail.
So we're still waiting for some guidance on this one, aren't we? So he only announced it a couple of weeks ago, and there is still some more guidance to come.
Yes.
We're expecting to be similar with usual hours to the way furlough was.
I imagine it's going to be similar to furlough.
But let's be fair, that was pretty complicated.
Absolutely, yes.
So
the scheme is going to run from 1st of November up to the end of April, so for 6 months, which is good.
But they might change it part way through, as you said, hasn't it?
After 3 months, they're going to review the amount of hours that employees have got to work, so they may increase the 33% minimum higher or decrease it depending on if the businesses are struggling or if we've had to go into a second lockdown.
Yeah, so
he'll make the judgment call.
Like with the second self-employment grant, he's giving himself a bit of flexibility to see how we go through the winter and how COVID goes through the winter.
Yes.
So there's a really good table actually in the fact sheet, isn't there, that talks about the different ranges. So if somebody works 70% of the normal hours, obviously the government's only paying 10% of that, aren't they?
So the key is the more hours you need your employee to work, the less the government are going to pay. So it'll taper down to the amount of grant you receive, which is only fair.
Which is fair enough.
There will be a minimum, a capped amount that they'll contribute to.
So same as furlough, they're not going to pay an unlimited.
Unfortunately not, and that's £697.92 per month. So it's
a very specific
accurate
number.
Figure, yes.
We've worked that out from something. I'd like to know the maths behind that, but
absolutely. Also for large employers, it might be worth mentioning, large businesses, there'll be a financial assessment test, whereas for small and medium businesses, they'll won't.
Financial assessment test means that they'll be checking that they aren't paying out dividends and doing other things for shareholders and claiming this money from the government.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's obviously the really big thing that's been announced recently, but I think there's a couple of other things we should talk about, because when we spoke last time, we talked about the job retention bonus that's coming for people who access furlough
previously,
and we've had a few more details on that now, haven't we? We've had a bit more of an understanding.
And we'll put a link on the bottom of this recording, won't we, to our website?
So we've got some good stuff on our website, but I think it's just worth reminding people what this was going to do. So this was going to pay £1,000 per employee that you had on furlough.
Yes.
Assuming that you'd correctly claimed your furlough.
Absolutely.
And that they carried on being employed by you for November, December, January.
Yes.
And what do they need to earn in those months? There's a minimum,
so they've got to earn a minimum of £520 on average a month for those 3 months.
So it's going to look at the 3 months, and as long as 1,560 has been paid over those 3 months,
absolutely,
that will be fine. And so that means people could actually still claim this if you've had to put somebody onto the job support scheme.
Yes, there's no restriction. If you need to put them on the job support scheme after the furlough scheme, then you can still claim this job retention bonus.
As long as you're paying them.
As long as you're paying them the minimum amount. It's obviously £1,000 per employee, which is good, but they can't be on working their notice at any point up to the 31st of January.
Because it's got to be that you've kept those jobs and you're intending to keep them.
It's got to be a viable job and you're going to keep them on.
And we can't make a claim until...
No, it opens on the 15th of February and unfortunately the window then closes on the 31st of March.
So people have got to be quite quick. Now, from what they've said and the details we've had so far is that they are going to tell us a bit more about how we make that claim, but not till the end of January. But it's certainly worth people, as they come to the end of furlough at the end of October, because furlough ends at the end of October, to start making a note of people who you think...
Yes, get all your information in order. Employees that you think you're going to make a claim for, you'll need names, NI numbers, etc. Get all your information collated so you know where you're at.
And the other thing to remember is this grant will be taxable. So again, people have got to keep a note of it, and it will go on. It will be taxable for their business.
Yeah. And one final point, just to recap on the job support scheme. Obviously, for the furlough scheme, we had to look at our contracts of employment. Get some HR advice on varying terms of contracts to place them on furlough. We'll have to do the same on the job support scheme because obviously you're placing them on short-time working.
So again, it's going to be important to have that signed piece of paper from whoever you're putting on the scheme, because it is, like you say, it is another change to people's contracts. So they must have that signed piece of paper. And then the last thing I think we wanted to talk about, which is a bit of sort of housekeeping to do with furlough, is the fact that HMRC now are starting to audit people's claims and check things, aren't they?
We've seen over 3,000 letters go out to employers, and I imagine more are going to be coming in the short time.
I mean, the government have said several times they are concerned that the scheme has been subject to a little bit of misuse and things like that. So one thing we just wanted to talk about was the penalties that people can face if So genuinely, at the start, somebody might have misunderstood the scheme,
might have claimed wrong,
might have claimed the wrong amount.
Everyone's human, mistakes do happen.
And the rules were pretty vague at the start, weren't
they?
Especially
changing.
Especially if you had people on overtime, you weren't sure how much of that you could pay.
No, variable workers, fixed rate workers. So it was a bit of a minefield.
It was confusing. So there may be people who are watching this webinar who think, oh, right at the start, I think I claimed a bit too much. So our advice to them is get that paid back.
Yes.
Check you've overpaid, and if you have, get it paid back, because if the government find it and you're aware you've overclaimed, they're going to charge you a penalty, and that penalty is 100% of the overclaim. So effectively, you're going to end up paying back twice as much as you've had.
200% that cost will be to you, unfortunately.
And equally, if somebody has to pay everything back, they then can't get the job retention bonus for somebody. Or if people have chosen, because we know in the press some businesses have chosen to repay the furlough. Bigger businesses such as Primark, I think, have said they didn't need it, so they paid theirs back. So they also won't be able to access the job retention bonus. Again, there's things on our website about all these things.
We've got some links and we've sent emails out. So if you have got any further queries, please get in touch, and we'll be happy to chat through with you. Just
give us a call and we'll talk about it. There's loads of stuff on the website. Obviously, there's going to be stuff coming out in the next few weeks.
Detail we're expected in
and we'll keep updating people on that. Thanks a lot, Kat.
Yes, thanks for listening.